Question that's been asked, so we'll take a quick look at it, is which teams are helped or hurt by switching the divisions around. So the idea being that we get a season this year, we're going to have an all-Canadian division, right? And then you're going to have 3 other divisions. Which teams are helped or hurt by this? And in putting this together, and these are the divisions according to Greg Wyshynski of ESPN that he's heard, that's rumored to be what the NHL is looking at. You have a group of death up here, and it reminds me of World Cup. If you watch soccer's World Cup, you know there's always a group of death. You look at the 4 countries that are up there and you go, wow, whoever's 4th in that division is going to be better than the first team in that division. And so there's definitely a group of death aspect to this. So you'd have your West, Central, East, and Canadian division. So we'll start off with the West. And I've put them in the order that I think they probably finish in. Don't take it as gospel. Don't get mad because I haven't done a lot of thinking over it other than just, all right, so what's the most likely? Yeah, it's fine. Not doing official previews yet because we don't know when the season's coming back. We may not know until whenever. So Vegas, I think, would win this division in the regular season. I do. I think Vegas would be number 1, and I think we would see Colorado second place in that division. But it would be close. And so they are, in my eyes, the 2 best teams. And then Dallas, I have at 3rd. So I'm wearing the Mooterist right now. Dallas at 3rd on that division. And then after that, it's really wide open. It is. This is why I had a couple of questions today in the live stream. Do you think San Jose has a chance? In the Pacific Division, not so much. You'd have Edmonton, Vancouver, Calgary, and Vegas, and some pretty strong teams that would be hard for San Jose to pass. But in this division, you'd have Arizona. Well, Arizona, a team that's been capped out, and they don't look like they're building up right now. I'm not sure where Arizona's at. Minnesota, has Minnesota fixed things to the point where they're going to be a playoff team next year? You've got the Kings, you've got the Ducks. So, in theory, if San Jose gets off to a decent start, and if they're able to keep themselves ahead of other teams, San Jose may very well be a dark horse. And then this is where it gets interesting, too. So we understand Canadian teams would just play each other. If you're just playing in your division, and you're in the West, and your record is amazing because you're playing against weaker opponents than maybe a team in, say, the East, how do playoff seedings really technically work? How should they work? Playoff format, I think, is going to be a discussion point here. Because, again, a team that's 4th spot in one division may be better than a team that's first in another, right? Now, the Central Division, this is where things get weird. It's not the first time Tampa's been in a Central Division, but it's the first time in a while. And I think they'd be the best in that division. But, boy, the travel would be rough. Now, I know Minnesota fans are saying, hey, our travel in the West is really awful. Yes. Yes, it is. For Minnesota, that would be a brutal division. And then the Central, it's tough for Tampa, St. Louis, and then I have Pittsburgh in 3rd, but I could see Columbus knocking them down. But then there's Florida and Nashville. And really from Pittsburgh to Nashville, it is kind of a mess. Chicago and Detroit, I think, would be down towards the bottom. The interesting thing, of course, is that would renew the rivalry between the Blackhawks and the Red Wings. It would renew a rivalry between the Red Wings and the Blues. And I think fans would love that. They really would. I understand why Detroit's in the Eastern time zone and why they fought to get put into the East when the NHL last did a realignment. But I think this would be more entertaining for the fans. I do. I think that for Detroit fans, I think you'd rather play against Chicago than against Ottawa. You'd rather see them against St. Louis than against Buffalo. And it's not a slam against Buffalo or Ottawa, just those are your natural rivals over the decades, right? So it'll be kind of a Central Norris division right there. And it's a strong division. I think this division's stronger than the West. But your group of death is the East. In my opinion, this is it. And really, this could be rough. Now, I have Boston first. But I don't think Boston probably ends up finishing first. I just thought, they got the President's Trophy. Sure, I'll put them at the top spot in the division. Do I think they actually end up getting there? Probably not. Philadelphia, Carolina, the Islanders, the Capitals. These are all pretty good teams. These are all good teams. The Rangers, up and coming, adding some exciting young players. Buffalo and New Jersey definitely should be improved this year from last year. This is your group of death. If you're a Buffalo fan and you're excited, and you rightfully should be, seeing that you go from the Atlantic Division to this would have to be somewhat frustrating. And yet, I will say this, if Buffalo is playing against these 7 teams exclusively, they will probably end up with a record that is below 500, but it might be best for them long term because you're playing against some of the best teams. And there's some really good rivalries there. So for Buffalo, it could work out to their advantage, not this season, but in seasons beyond. And then, of course, the Canadian division, Toronto, Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, Montreal, Winnipeg, and Ottawa. Now, where the question mark comes in is, all right, so how do you decide who makes the playoffs? Expanded playoffs are likely, and these divisions may make it more likely. So you could have it where the top 4 teams in each division makes the playoffs. Fine. And then maybe you have a tournament where it's 1v16, or maybe say you have the Central and the West and the East and Canada. Because Canada, the teams are all across the country. So travel is going to be really, really bad for the Canadian teams in general. Although part of the talks have been you'd play back-to-backs. So Ottawa would come to Vancouver and play 2 games. And then they might go to Calgary and play 2 games. And then they go home. And then maybe Toronto comes in and plays 2 games. To cut down on travel, make things a little bit safer, this kind of thing, right? But it's still, your travel in Canada is going to be hard. Very, very hard. And then your playoffs might be interesting too if you did do some kind of a cross between the divisions. I kind of like the idea of having the top 2 teams in each division make the playoffs and then have the 16 teams beneath them going through the play-in, the same as we just had this summer. And it would be the final time you would do that. Now, I've talked before about the schedule and how it's a fine line to get that schedule done by July 15th. Your Stanley Cup has to be awarded by July 15th. I know the NHL's talked about, we could play with that. You could, but you don't. You don't want to be going over into what should be next year's Olympics, right? So it is important to get it done, but a play-in might be interesting. So, for instance, San Jose could end up getting into the play-in round, and then you cross. So you might have the Kings, who are 6th here, play against Pittsburgh. Minnesota against Columbus. Arizona, Florida, Dallas, Nashville. You'd have that cross. 1 versus 4. And then you'd have it where it's a best 2 out of 3, but all of the games belong to the team with home ice advantage. So you don't travel at that stage. So here you'd have Calgary Rangers, Vancouver, Washington, Montreal, New York, and Winnipeg and Carolina. Now, of course, the interesting thing with this as well is you only have 1 Canadian team missing out on the play-in and 2 from each of the American divisions, which would be frustrating to some American owners. But it would be welcomed by Rogers, first off. Rogers would be guaranteed to have 6 teams in the playoffs. They might start making back some of the money they've spent on this massive deal for the television rights in Canada. And just for the NHL in general, that's going to get your ratings up. The ratings were bad for the return. They were bad. Now, just as a guy with a YouTube channel, my numbers were really good. But again, part of that is going to be that the channel grew. If the channel had stayed at the same level of subscribers over the previous 12 months, I probably would have seen a drop in my overall viewership. So it would be interesting to see if they do a play-in again, because I think part of what players may want is, for instance, and I'll mention San Jose. Let's say San Jose has a nice little run and they end up finishing 4th in that division. So they end up being the number 1 seed on their side and potentially, have a decent chance at a good playoff run. If I'm in the East, I might look at San Jose and say, yeah, and you guys would be dead last in our division. If we added San Jose to our division, they're last. So that argument that we have had for decades in hockey could get amplified if teams are only playing against other teams in their division when you get to a playoff. So it could be interesting as to how you would do this, how you would decide on all the seedings. And I think that it benefits the weaker teams in the West. I think it hurts the teams in the East that are looking to build themselves up, whether it's the Rangers, the Sabres, or the Devils. Because now you have to go through the Caps, the Islanders, the Hurricanes, the Flyers, and the Bruins. Those are your 5 other teams you're playing. That is really tough. So I would think that if this is how the divisions look, don't be surprised if some teams have really ugly records at the end of the year. And don't be surprised if some teams have gaudy, great records. And then playoff time rolls around. We'll see if that momentum carries over. 2012-2013, the Chicago Blackhawks right out of the gate were fantastic. They were fantastic all the way through the regular season, and they kept that all the way through the playoffs. And that's the only time I've seen that, where one team is just consistently the best in the league. I don't expect that necessarily this year or this season, but we'll see. We'll see what kind of format they use and how this is going to work. Keep in mind, I know there's people who think, they're just going to shut it down. You would be the only league, the only professional league in North America not existing at a time where you're looking to increase the amount of money you're making in the U.S., you're looking to stay relevant in the U.S., and you're trying not to have teams potentially lose enough money that they could end up being transferred or just folded. So there are financial reasons that owners may not want to play and lose money without fans in attendance. But in the long term, the picture that you look at over the next 5 to 10 years, this season's really important. The one thing is, if these divisions are really, really popular and ratings are up, and if fans love seeing Canadian teams against each other every night, and who wouldn't? Honestly, I think this would be fun. Every night then it's a constant sniping match in Canada, right? Because you're always against another Canadian team. Would the NHL be tempted to leave them as is for now? And then what happens when Seattle comes in, right? So Seattle comes in next year, and they're not Canadian. We could make them honorary Canadians, sure, but that kind of throws things off, and that's where all we'll just move somebody to Quebec and that'll fix it comes up. And that sneaky sort of Quebec thing, that's why I love the viewer that will not stop, will not give up on the idea of Quebec having a team. And thank you for not giving up. But let me know what you guys think. And again, these are divisions that are rumored. These are rumored. These are not set in stone. Nothing's come out yet. We don't know what they're going to do. But which teams benefit the most and which teams are hurt the most under this system? Like I said, I think the East would be absolutely brutal. Not that the Central would be a party, but I think, and again, Canada, I think there's a lot of good teams in Canada, but in terms of big-time contenders, you have them in the East. Don't rule out the Capitals. Don't rule out the Bruins or the Flyers. You have them in the Central. You have the defending Stanley Cup champions. You have Pittsburgh, who won back-to-back 2016, 2017. Oh, and the Blues, who won in 2019. And then you have, in the West, you have the Vegas Golden Knights, the Colorado Avalanche, who are seen as contenders, and Dallas, who were in the Stanley Cup final months ago. And then in the Canadian division, we haven't had any of these teams in the Stanley Cup final for... It's been a while, since Vancouver in 2011. So I think this would kind of be what the Norris division was back in the 80s. The Norris division in hockey, for those who didn't follow hockey back in the 80s, may not have been born. It was a division where there was always a lot of fighting. There was always a lot of hate. There was some real dogfights between teams. But in general, they didn't have a really true Stanley Cup contender. And they didn't really have a chance against the winner of the Smythe division, who was either Calgary or Edmonton. I'm not saying that the Canadian division would necessarily follow that exact same template, but they would have a hard time. Whoever wins this division would have a hard time knocking out Tampa, knocking out Vegas, potentially Philly, Washington, Boston. These would be a tough call. But we'll see, right? So let me know who you think has helped or hurt. Does this mean that we get a better chance at a Canadian Stanley Cup champion or not? I will go out on a limb and say probably not. Probably not. But if 24 out of 31 teams make it and 6 of them are Canadian, that's at least 25% to start. How many of them get eliminated in round 1 through play-ins or whatever? Or if there's 16 out of 31 and 4 of them are Canadian, again, that's still 25%. But again, which one has the staying power? I think Toronto or Edmonton could potentially get it done. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And again, this is just preliminary. This isn't necessarily how they're going to look. And this is not necessarily a prediction for how they're going to finish. I just went through and went, yeah, that looks about right. Sure, fine. But we'll get into official previews as soon as the NHL makes some sort of announcement. Thank you guys so much for all your support. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for helping me continue with the channel's building, and for those who attended the live streams this morning through various means that they were carried out. Thank you guys for that as well. I will talk to you soon.